Tonight, I'd like to talk with you about immigration.
All right. Well, the president there, as you heard him talking about and announcing his executive order on immigration, obviously a very big story. But now there is another interesting wrinkle in that. We are now getting the first court ruling on that controversial move. A federal judge named Arthur Schwab, he's in Pennsylvania, declared the president's action unconstitutional. He said that President Obama is violating the constitutionally mandated separation of powers by essentially rewriting the law himself. But the judge wasn't ruling on the president's immigration action. He was actually considering another legal case. So let's bring in some lawyers to explain this all. Brian Claypool, he's a civil rights litigator and a criminal defense attorney. And Robert Bianchi, he's a trial attorney, criminal defense attorney, and a former prosecutor. Okay, gentlemen, Robert, let's start with you. The judge saying that the president is basically legislating from the executive branch, something they're not supposed to do. So what's the legal significance of this judge's ruling?
There's absolutely no legal significance to this ruling. It's what we call in the law dicta. It was placed inside of an opinion. It wasn't the constitutional arguments on the president's memorandum and executive order were not even vetted, briefed by anybody. So why it was in this decision, one can only imagine. But it has absolutely no jural effect whatsoever, although, of course, it will affect the court of public opinion where individuals will want to use it in order to support their position.
Okay, so Brian, let's explain exactly what happened. This judge was considering a criminal case against a Honduran illegal immigrant. The guy was kicked out of the United States back in 2005. He came back to the United States. He got a DWI, and now he wants to stay in the United States. So the judge looked at the impact of the executive order on immigration. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it doesn't make sense. And the last time I checked this morning, I hadn't seen that Judge Schwab was running for U.S. Congress, because what he's trying to do is exactly what he criticized President Obama for doing.
But hold on a second. How does it not make sense? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but how does it not make sense? This guy, this Honduran guy, is arguing that he wants to stay in the United States. So the judge looks at the president's immigration order to try to figure out whether he can stay in the United States or not. It seems pretty simple.
Well, it's not the same, because President Obama's immigration order dealt with illegal immigrants who were living in the United States continuously prior to 2010, who had children who were either U.S. residents or permanent residents.
All right,
this doesn't apply here. This young man was deported, Heather, in 2005. Then he tried to re-enter the United States, and then he did, and then he got in trouble.
DUI,
so it does not.
But one thing that we have not mentioned, and Brian, this is it. Apparently he had a child once he came back to the United States, and so now he's trying to claim that he wants to stay here in the United States because he has a kid. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, obviously you have to verify. The first issue you have to verify is whether he has lived in the United States continuously prior to 2010. He doesn't meet that criteria. Let's assume he does, though. If he does have a child who's a permanent resident of the United States, then maybe the executive order does apply. But let's get to the next issue then. The other part of Judge Schwab's ruling was ridiculous. He said that President Obama could not issue a general threshold criteria for determining whether illegal immigrants should be deported. And that's ridiculous, because all presidents are allowed to issue discretionary orders like that.
You know, Robert, I'm wondering if this is a case where a lot of judges across the country confront these issues on a daily basis, and you have this executive order from the president coming down. And if I'm a judge, I'm thinking, how do I incorporate the president's directive with current law? And what do we do with these folks?
This wasn't the judge's prerogative. This is the prosecutors and the law enforcement and the executive branch's prerogative. As a former head county prosecutor, I can say that we can issue executive directives to people about how we want to enforce law enforcement. There's a tremendous amount of discretion that law enforcement has, and the president and the attorney general of this country can issue as to whether they're going to decriminalize it, whether or not they're going to focus their energy and resources on it. That is completely a prosecutorial and executive branch of government decision. Why the judge jumped into this, where they're supposed to be interpreting whether or not the laws are followed and whether the executive branch of government is acting properly at this stage, is beyond me.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Brian Claypool and Robert Bianchi, thanks so much for joining us. To
Thanks,
be
Heather.
continued. There'll certainly be a lot of debate about this one.
Thanks.
Thanks.